7 things that happen when you start trusting life, Buddhist teachings. There comes a moment in every person's life when the constant effort to control everything collapses under its own weight. You wake up one day and realize that no matter how carefully you plan, no matter how much you push or resist, life continues to flow according to a rhythm that seems far beyond your personal will. The more you try to grasp it, the more it slips through your fingers. The Buddha taught that much of our suffering comes from this resistance, the deep-seated illusion that we can bend the entire universe to our desires. But he also offered another path, the art of trusting life. Trusting life does not mean passive surrender or blind faith. It is not the absence of action, but the presence of wisdom. It is the understanding that life itself is an expression of Dharma, the natural law of balance, impermanence, and interdependence. To trust life is to allow this law to unfold without constant interference from the ego. It means realizing that behind every moment of uncertainty lies a deeper intelligence, a rhythm of cause and effect, of beginnings and endings, that cannot be fully understood by thought, but can be felt through awareness. When you begin to trust life, something remarkable starts to happen. Your heart softens, your mind quiets, and the need to fight every battle disappears. You stop viewing life as an enemy to conquer and begin to see it as a teacher, patiently guiding you toward understanding. This trust becomes the soil from which peace grows, not because the world outside has changed, but because your relationship with it has transformed. In this teaching, we will explore 7 things that happen when you start trusting life, as understood through Buddhist wisdom. Each one is a subtle shift in consciousness, a quiet revolution within. These are not abstract ideas. They are experiences that unfold naturally when resistance fades and acceptance deepens. Through these insights, you will see how the act of trusting life reconnects you with what the Buddha called the middle way, a state of balance between doing and being, between striving and allowing. Let us begin with the first transformation that occurs when you finally stop struggling against the current and start floating with it. Inner peace replaces fear. Inner peace replaces fear. When you start trusting life, one of the first and most profound changes that occurs is the quiet disappearance of fear. It does not vanish suddenly or dramatically. Rather, it dissolves like mist under morning sunlight. Fear, which once dominated your thoughts and decisions, begins to lose its power. This is not because the external world becomes safer or more predictable, but because your inner world becomes steadier, calmer, and aligned with a deeper truth, the truth of impermanence and interconnectedness. To understand this transformation, we must first look at the nature of fear itself. In Buddhist psychology, fear arises from clinging, from the attachment to what we want and the aversion to what we do not want. We fear losing what we love. We fear pain, failure, rejection, death. All these fears are rooted in the false sense of a permanent self that must be protected at all costs. The Buddha called this illusion atta, the ego identity that believes it stands apart from the rest of existence. As long as we live from this illusion, fear becomes inevitable, because anything that threatens our imagined separateness feels like death. But when you begin to trust life, this illusion starts to weaken. You see that everything, including yourself, is part of a vast, dynamic process. There is no fixed you that can be harmed, only a flow of sensations, thoughts, and experiences arising and passing away. This understanding does not come through intellectual reasoning, but through mindful observation. When you sit quietly in meditation and witness the impermanence of each breath, each emotion, each thought, something inside you begins to loosen. You realize that if everything is in constant flux, then trying to control it is futile and unnecessary. Life sustains itself. The same intelligence that makes the trees bloom and the stars move through the sky also moves through you. This insight brings a serenity that fear cannot touch. Imagine standing on the edge of an ocean. The waves rise and fall. Sometimes they are gentle, sometimes violent. The fearful mind tries to stop the waves, to demand calm seas before entering. The trusting mind, however, steps into the water knowing that the waves are part of the ocean's nature. It does not seek to control them, but to move with them. In doing so, it discovers that even in turbulence there is rhythm. Even in chaos there is order. When you start trusting life, fear begins to transform into curiosity. What once seemed threatening now becomes mysterious. You start asking not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What is life trying to show me through this?" This shift from resistance to inquiry changes everything. Instead of shrinking away from experience, you begin to meet it directly. You stop running from discomfort and begin to listen to it. You discover that fear was never the enemy. It was a messenger, pointing to the places where trust had not yet taken root. This is why the Buddha often compared fear to a shadow. The shadow is not destroyed by fighting it. It disappears when light enters. The light in this case is awareness. Through mindfulness, you bring awareness to fear without judgment. You observe how it arises in the body, the tightening of the chest, the shallow breath, the racing thoughts, and you simply stay present. At first, the mind resists, wanting to flee, to fix, to escape. But as you remain, as you trust that you are safe in awareness itself, something miraculous happens. Fear dissolves into energy. What was once paralysis becomes movement. What was once pain becomes vitality. Trusting life does not mean you will never feel afraid again. Fear still appears, but it no longer defines you. It becomes like a passing cloud against the vast sky of consciousness. You start to realize that fear is not a signal that something is wrong. It is simply a reminder that you are alive and growing. Every new experience, every unknown path, naturally awakens a ripple of uncertainty. But now, instead of running, you breathe into it. You whisper silently, "I trust this." And in that moment, the fear softens into peace. Over time, this peace becomes your natural state. You stop reacting impulsively to every uncertainty and instead respond with presence. When things fall apart, you do not collapse with them. When plans change, you adapt. When losses come, you grieve without despair. You begin to see the rhythm of life, expansion, contraction, birth and death, and you understand that you are part of this rhythm, not apart from it. This understanding is liberation. Fear thrives on separation. Peace is born from unity. The more you sense your connection with all things, the less room there is for fear. You begin to see that even what you once called misfortune or failure has a purpose. Perhaps it was there to awaken compassion, to teach surrender, to break the shell of pride. Life, when trusted, reveals its intelligence through every event. You realize that even pain has a sacred function. It dismantles the false and points you back to the real. And then something unexpected occurs. Gratitude arises. You start thanking life, not only for its blessings, but for its challenges. You thank it for the heartbreak that opened your heart, for the loss that taught you impermanence, for the delay that strengthened your patience. Gratitude becomes the proof of trust. When you are grateful, even in difficulty, it means you believe that life knows what it is doing. The Buddha once said, "The root of suffering is attachment," but he also showed that the root of peace is trust. To live in trust is to live in harmony with the Dharma, to stop demanding that reality match your preferences and instead open yourself to what is. This is not resignation, it is awakening. You no longer see life as something happening to you, but something happening through you. In the stillness of trust, fear has no ground to stand on. You walk through uncertainty with the quiet confidence that whatever comes will serve your evolution. You stop asking for guarantees and start walking by awareness. This is freedom, not freedom from change, but freedom within change. And so, the first miracle of trusting life unfolds. Inner peace replaces fear. The moment you stop fighting the unknown, it becomes your teacher. You see that the world has always been moving toward your growth, not your destruction. Life is not against you, it is for you, always. If this message has brought you calm and reflection, remember to subscribe to the channel and continue walking this path of awareness with us. Your journey toward peace has only begun. Acceptance transforms suffering. When a person truly begins to trust life, the second transformation that naturally unfolds is acceptance. Acceptance is not the same as resignation, indifference, or defeat. It is the quiet strength that arises when you stop fighting reality. It is the profound understanding that what is happening right now could not be otherwise, because it is the direct result of countless causes and conditions that have come together in this precise instant. To accept is to stand within the stream of existence and allow it to wash over you without resistance, to feel both the warmth and the cold, the calm and the storm, and to know that all of it is part of the same living river. In the Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths, suffering is not denied. It is embraced as the starting point of awakening. The first truth is the acknowledgement that suffering exists. Every human life includes pain, loss, disappointment, illness, aging, and death. The second truth is that suffering arises from craving, from the insistent wish that things be other than they are. We crave permanence in an impermanent world. We crave pleasure without its shadow of pain. We crave certainty in a reality defined by change. Acceptance dissolves this craving, not by eliminating desire entirely, but by transforming it. You no longer desire for life to match your personal script. Instead, you desire to see clearly. This seeing is radical. When you stop resisting, your perception changes. The same event that once provoked bitterness now reveals itself as a teacher. A failure that once felt humiliating becomes an opportunity to understand humility. A heartbreak that once seemed unbearable becomes a gateway into compassion. Acceptance does not erase the pain itself, but it removes the unnecessary layer of suffering that resistance adds on top of pain. The Buddha compared this to being struck by two arrows. The first arrow is unavoidable pain, a physical illness, a loss, a disappointment. The second arrow is the mental resistance. Why me? This shouldn't have happened. I can't bear this. When you trust life and practice acceptance, you stop shooting the second arrow. You feel the pain fully, but you do not turn it into endless suffering. Imagine standing beneath heavy rain. If you resist, you run, you hide, you curse the sky, yet the rain keeps falling. When you accept it, you stop wasting energy on avoidance. You feel the drops on your skin, and something shifts. The rain becomes simply rain. It is no longer your enemy, it is an element of life. In the same way, when you accept what is happening inside and outside you, experience loses its sting. It simply becomes experience. You begin to see that every moment, even the difficult ones, carries the fragrance of truth if you breathe deeply enough to notice. Acceptance is the gateway to compassion, because it begins with accepting yourself. Many people believe they must first become peaceful before they can accept themselves, but the opposite is true. Peace comes after acceptance. The mind that constantly judges, condemns, and compares cannot rest. It says, I should not feel this anger, I should be stronger, I should be wiser. Every should is a form of violence against what already is. The Buddha taught mindfulness as a way to drop the should. When you observe your anger or sadness without judgment, when you say, anger is here, sadness is here, you create space. That space is acceptance. Within it, emotions lose their destructive charge and reveal their impermanent nature. You realize that no state of mind defines you. Each is a visitor that comes and goes. This inner acceptance naturally extends to others. Once you recognize that your own thoughts and emotions arise from causes beyond conscious control, you begin to see that others are the same. The person who hurt you is also acting out of their own ignorance and pain. Understanding this does not mean approving harmful behavior, but it frees you from hatred. Hatred is the refusal to accept that others are conditioned beings just like you. The Buddha called this ignorance the root of all conflict. When you truly see that everyone is struggling to wake up from the dream of separation, compassion replaces judgment. You stop needing to punish and start wishing for healing. There is a story in the Buddhist tradition of a monk who was insulted daily by a villager. Every morning, the man would stand by the path to the monastery and shout abuses, hoping to provoke anger, but the monk always smiled and continued walking. One day, the villager, frustrated by the monk's calm, asked, "Why don't you react? I insult you every day." The monk replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man said, "To the giver." The monk bowed and said, "Exactly. I do not accept your anger, so it remains with you." This is the power of acceptance. It disarms aggression by refusing to feed it. When you trust life, you begin to see that everything that comes your way is an invitation to awaken. The difficult people, the painful experiences, the unexpected losses, each is a mirror reflecting some part of your own consciousness that still resists reality. When you accept them, you integrate the lesson and move closer to wholeness. Life, then, becomes a continuous dialogue between your inner world and the outer circumstances designed to reveal it. You no longer divide experiences into good or bad, you simply recognize them as necessary. Acceptance also transforms your relationship with time. Most of your suffering comes from dwelling in the past or fearing the future. You replay mistakes, regret words you said or didn't say, worry about outcomes that haven't arrived. But when you accept life as it is now, the mind returns to the present. This moment, you realize, is the only place where peace is possible. The past is a memory, the future is imagination. Acceptance anchors you in the now, where reality unfolds without distortion. The Zen masters often said that enlightenment is simply the complete acceptance of the present moment. Nothing mystical, just the radical willingness to be here fully. It might sound simple, but it requires courage. Acceptance means giving up the illusion of control. The ego resists this because control gives it identity. "I am the one who makes things happen," it says. But when you see deeply, you recognize that your body, your thoughts, even your desires arise spontaneously. The heart beats, the lungs breathe, the mind thinks. Without your command, existence moves through you. You are not the driver, you are the vessel. Once this realization takes root, there is immense relief. You can finally exhale. You do your best in each moment, but you no longer cling to outcomes. You let life decide the rest. This detachment from results is not laziness, it is freedom. The Bhagavad Gita, another great Eastern text often aligned with Buddhist wisdom, echoes this truth. You have the right to action, but not to the fruits of action. When you accept this, every action becomes pure, done for its own sake, not for the ego's reward. You work, love, create, serve, and yet remain inwardly at peace because you are not enslaved by success or failure. Acceptance purifies motivation. You act from presence, not from fear or desire. There is a quiet dignity in this way of living. You become like a mountain, still unshaken by the winds of praise or blame. When life brings joy, you enjoy it fully. When it brings sorrow, you feel it deeply, but do not drown. The world continues to move, but your center remains still. This is the serenity that the Buddha's face embodies in every statue, not the smile of pleasure, but the gentle curve of understanding. It says, everything is just as it should be. At a deeper level, acceptance dissolves the boundaries between the self and life. You realize that what you called your life is not separate from the totality of existence. The same laws that govern the stars govern you. Every joy and every pain is part of the cosmic dance of cause and effect, birth and decay. When you resist, you create friction. When you accept, you flow in harmony. This is the essence of karma, not punishment or reward, but the unfolding of conditions. To accept karma is to acknowledge that what is happening now is the ripening of past causes, and that your response to it will plant the seeds of future experience. With acceptance, you stop blaming and start learning. Many people fear that acceptance means passivity, that if they accept their circumstances, they will never change them. But the opposite is true. Real acceptance is the foundation of intelligent action. When you see clearly what is, without denial, you can respond appropriately. Denial blinds you. Acceptance illuminates. The Buddha was not indifferent to suffering. His entire path was born from compassionate acceptance of it. He accepted that old age, sickness and death were part of life, and from that acceptance arose the motivation to seek liberation. Acceptance gives birth to wisdom because it allows you to see reality without distortion. In your own life, this might mean accepting that a relationship has ended, that a dream did not unfold as planned, that health has changed, that someone you love is gone. These are not easy truths, but they are real. When you resist them, you add layers of anguish. You replay, you imagine, you wish. When you accept, grief turns into tenderness. You begin to honor what was, rather than crave what could have been. You learn that love does not vanish when circumstances change. It simply transforms into memory, into gratitude, into understanding. Acceptance also reveals the impermanence of all things. You see that joy and sorrow are waves in the same ocean, that every rise contains the seed of a fall, and every fall prepares the ground for a rise. This understanding does not make you cold or detached. It makes you compassionate. You stop clinging to the highs and fearing the lows. You begin to ride the waves with grace. You learn to bow to both gain and loss, to both praise and blame. As teachers of equanimity, trusting life means realizing that whatever happens is part of your unfolding path. Even the mistakes you regret were necessary steps toward understanding. The Buddha said, "No one saves us but ourselves, and yet we cannot walk the path alone." Life itself is the silent companion that keeps showing you where you are still asleep. Each challenge is a bell ringing you back to mindfulness. Acceptance is the act of listening to that bell without resentment. There is a moment in meditation when you stop trying to manipulate the experience. You stop adjusting the breath, stop chasing stillness, stop judging the thoughts. You simply sit. In that stillness, acceptance blooms naturally. You realize that nothing needs to be different. The breath rises and falls, the mind drifts and returns, and you are simply here. This simple awareness is the doorway to awakening. It is the same in daily life. The moment you stop demanding that reality obey your mind, you enter peace. Acceptance also changes your language. You stop saying "this is wrong" and begin saying "this too." This too is part of the path. That phrase, "this too," contains infinite compassion. It allows everything to belong. When joy comes, you whisper "this too." When loss comes, you whisper "this too." When uncertainty knocks, you say again "this too." Nothing is excluded, and therefore nothing can disturb your core. In the light of acceptance, suffering loses its identity. It no longer defines you as victim or hero. It becomes simply experience. You may cry, you may break, but even in those moments, a deeper awareness watches gently. That awareness knows that all forms arise and pass away, but awareness itself remains untouched. To live from that awareness is to live in trust. Over time, acceptance gives birth to serenity that no circumstance can destroy. The outer world may fluctuate endlessly. Relationships, health, finances, seasons, everything changes. But inside, there is an unmovable peace. This peace is not dependent on conditions. It is the natural state of a mind that has stopped arguing with what is. It is the peace the Buddha described as nibbana, the extinction of grasping and aversion. When acceptance becomes complete, even suffering reveals its sacred nature. You begin to see that every wound was a doorway to deeper understanding. Pain humbles the ego, dissolves arrogance, opens empathy. Without suffering, there would be no compassion. Without darkness, no recognition of light. Acceptance transforms suffering because it unveils its purpose, to awaken love. To trust life is to accept not only the pleasant but also the painful, not because you enjoy pain, but because you recognize that nothing is wasted in the hands of the universe. The broken pieces of your past, when seen with awareness, become the mosaic of your wisdom. Each scar tells a story of survival and surrender. Each loss teaches that nothing was truly yours to begin with. Each ending whispers of a beginning you could not yet see. Acceptance teaches humility. It shows that the mind does not have the final word on what is good or bad. How many times have you cursed an event only to later realize it saved you? How many times have you celebrated something that later brought pain? Life has a wider view than the human mind. Trusting it means acknowledging that you do not always know what is best, and that's all right. There is a greater intelligence unfolding through every circumstance. This humility allows you to rest in the mystery. You stop demanding answers from the universe and start listening. You become attentive rather than controlling, receptive rather than reactive. Life becomes a conversation instead of a struggle. You begin to sense guidance in silence, meaning in coincidences, tenderness even in challenges. Acceptance opens the channel through which the universe speaks. Ultimately, acceptance transforms suffering into wisdom. Every time you accept a moment as it is, you cut through ignorance. Every acceptance is an act of awakening. Slowly, the walls of resistance crumble, and you stand naked before reality, open, vulnerable, and free. This openness is the heart of enlightenment. It is not about escaping the world, but seeing it without distortion. You realize that nirvana and samsara are not two separate realms, but two ways of perceiving the same reality. One through resistance, the other through acceptance. In the quiet after struggle, you discover a deeper trust. You trust that even if everything you love fades, the essence of love remains. You trust that even in loss, something eternal witnesses without being lost. You trust that life, in its infinite wisdom, knows the way home. Acceptance does not make life easier, it makes it clearer. You still face storms, but now you sail with the wind instead of against it. You still feel pain, but it no longer breaks you. You still love, knowing that love might bring grief, and yet you love even more deeply because you understand its transience. This is the beauty of trusting life. It does not protect you from experience. It opens you to the fullness of experience. When you bow to life as it is, life bows back. It begins to flow through you effortlessly. You find yourself in the right places, meeting the right people, saying the right words, not because you control it, but because you are aligned with it. This alignment is what the Buddha meant by right view and right intention. From acceptance comes wisdom, from wisdom comes peace. So as you sit quietly and reflect, ask yourself, what am I still resisting? What part of life have I refused to accept? And can I, just for this moment, let it be as it is? Do not rush to change it, just allow it. Notice the release that follows. That release is the beginning of freedom. Acceptance is the gentle art of coming home to reality. It is the doorway through which suffering is purified into understanding. Once you step through it, life stops being an opponent and becomes an ally. You begin to see that everything that happens, pleasant or painful, is conspiring to awaken you. Trust that. Rest in that. Let go into that. When acceptance becomes your natural response, you realize that you have never been separate from life. You were only resisting it. The river was always carrying you, even when you thought you were lost. And as you finally surrender to its current, you feel an ancient peace rising within you. The peace of belonging, the peace of unity, the peace that has no opposite. If these words resonated with your heart and reminded you to soften into acceptance, remember to subscribe to the channel. Continue walking this path of awareness, where each lesson brings you closer to freedom and peace. Control turns into flow. When you begin to trust life, a profound metamorphosis unfolds in the way you relate to control. What was once a desperate attempt to manage every detail of existence slowly melts into a peaceful participation in the natural flow of things. This transformation does not happen overnight. It grows in silence, through countless small moments in which you surrender your grip and realize that life moves perfectly well without your interference. In truth, it always has. Trusting life is the art of discovering that control was never necessary for harmony to exist. It was only necessary for the ego to feel safe. Control is the ego's favorite illusion. It tells us that if we plan enough, work enough, anticipate enough, nothing will go wrong. Yet even in the most carefully ordered lives, uncertainty breaks through like grass through cracks in concrete. The Buddha taught that craving for control is a subtle form of suffering because it sets you in opposition to the impermanence of all things. You want to freeze time, to hold circumstances still, to dictate how others should behave, to prevent loss and guarantee success. But the law of impermanence, anicca, does not obey human will. Everything is transient, even the one who tries to control. The hands that grasp eventually must open. When you trust life, you begin to see that what you once called control was often resistance, wearing a mask of responsibility. You believed you were managing life when in fact you were fearing it. Control grows from fear, fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of uncertainty. The ego, terrified of impermanence, builds walls of plans, strategies, and expectations, hoping that these will protect it. But walls that keep out uncertainty also keep out spontaneity, joy, and discovery. To live in control is to live in a cage whose bars are made of your own thoughts. The first step toward freedom is noticing this pattern without judgment. You watch the mind as it plans obsessively, rehearses conversations, imagines worst-case scenarios, tries to bend others to its will. You see how exhausting it is to maintain the illusion that you can direct every current of life. Slowly, you begin to let go. Perhaps at first, you let go of small things, a delayed bus, a changed schedule, a forgotten item. You feel the impulse to resist, but you take a breath and allow it. You realize that nothing terrible happens. The world continues. In this small release, peace enters. You start to wonder what else you might let go of. Trusting life does not mean abandoning action. It means acting without clinging to outcomes. The Buddha's teaching of the middle way applies here, not excessive control, not careless passivity, but balanced participation. You still set intentions, you still make choices, but you do so with openness, knowing that outcomes are shaped by countless factors beyond your command. This awareness transforms action into meditation. You act fully in the present moment and release the result into the hands of life. The burden of making things work disappears. You become an instrument of a larger harmony. When you live this way, you begin to experience what many spiritual traditions call flow. Flow is not something you create. It is what remains when resistance ends. It is the natural rhythm of the universe moving through you, the effortless unfolding of action that arises from presence. Artists know this when they paint without thinking. Musicians feel it when the music seems to play itself. Monks experience it in meditation when breath and awareness become one. In flow, there is no controller, only movement. There is no separation between the dancer and the dance. This state of flow is not limited to special moments. It can become the foundation of daily life. When you walk fully. When you eat fully. When you speak with awareness. Life becomes a single continuous meditation. You do not rush to finish or strive to perfect. You participate wholeheartedly. This is what the Zen masters meant by chop wood, carry water. It is not the task that matters, but the quality of presence within it. Control tightens, flow relaxes. In control, the mind says, I must achieve. In flow, the heart whispers, I am already where I need to be. As control dissolves, creativity awakens. The mind that no longer fears mistakes becomes playful. You begin to see life as an experiment rather than an exam. Each situation becomes an opportunity to learn rather than a test to pass. This is freedom, the freedom to respond spontaneously to life rather than through conditioned habits. The Buddha called this responsiveness prajna, intuitive wisdom. It is intelligence unclouded by fear, arising naturally from stillness. In the flow of trust, even difficulties become part of the dance. When challenges arise, you do not freeze or collapse, you adjust. You move with circumstances instead of against them. Like water that shapes itself to the container, you remain yourself while adapting to the moment. This adaptability is the secret of resilience. A tree that refuses to bend breaks in the storm. A tree that sways survives. Flow is not weakness. It is supreme strength because it cannot be broken. The ego fears this state because it equates letting go with losing control and losing control with chaos. But the deeper truth is the opposite. Chaos is born from control, not from freedom. When you try to force reality into rigid patterns, you create conflict. When you allow things to move according to their nature, balance emerges on its own. The Buddha observed this in the natural world. Seasons change, rivers flow, life and death alternate without central command. Harmony exists without a controller because every element cooperates through interdependence. You too are part of that system. When you trust this order, anxiety fades. The mind often says, if I don't control things, everything will fall apart. Yet notice, the earth spins, the sun rises, your heart beats, your breath flows, all without your management. Life sustains itself. When you truly see this, you begin to rest. You no longer need to be the manager of the universe. You can simply be a witness, participating with reverence. Trusting life becomes the highest form of intelligence. Letting go of control also heals relationships. Much of human conflict arises from the desire to make others conform to our expectations. We want people to behave, love, speak, and think according to our preferences. When they don't, we suffer. But when you begin to trust that every being is following their own path of awakening, you allow them freedom. You stop trying to shape them and start supporting them. Love becomes spacious, not possessive. Compassion replaces control. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first because love intertwined with control feels safe. It gives the illusion of predictability. But once you love without control, you taste the purity of connection unburdened by fear. It is love that liberates both the giver and the receiver. The practice of mindfulness is the key to entering this flow. Mindfulness teaches you to observe each moment without trying to manipulate it. You watch the breath, the sensations, the thoughts, the emotions, and see that they rise and fall naturally. You realize that awareness itself does not need to interfere. It simply witnesses. Gradually, this attitude extends to daily life. You witness events without constant evaluation. You notice how life unfolds perfectly, even when it doesn't match your plans. This observation builds confidence in the larger intelligence that governs existence. There is an old Zen saying, "Let go or be dragged." It points to the truth that resistance is suffering. When you cling to control, life drags you because you are trying to move against its current. When you let go, you float. The current still flows, but now it carries you instead of exhausting you. The direction might surprise you, but in hindsight you see it was always leading somewhere meaningful. Trust turns hindsight into foresight. You begin to know, even before outcomes appear, that life is guiding you where you need to go. This shift from control to flow changes your perception of time. In control, you live in constant anticipation or regret. You plan the future, review the past, rarely tasting the present. In flow, time disappears. You enter the eternal now, where each moment is complete. The Buddha called this tathata, suchness, the simple, direct experience of reality as it is, before thought labels it. To live in suchness is to live in harmony. You are not pushing life forward or holding it back. You are moving at the same rhythm as the universe itself. Letting go of control also brings humility. You realize that much of what you thought you achieved by willpower was actually grace. The right people appeared, the right opportunities opened, inspiration arrived from nowhere. You see how dependent every success was on invisible networks of cause and effect. Gratitude replaces pride. You begin to thank life for carrying you rather than congratulating yourself for steering. This humility softens the heart. You become kinder, more patient, more understanding. Flow also teaches discernment. To trust life does not mean to drift aimlessly. It means to listen deeply to what the moment asks for. Sometimes the flow calls for stillness, sometimes for bold action. The difference between control and flow is the source of action. Control acts from fear, flow acts from wisdom. Control says, "I must do this to feel safe." Flow says, "This feels aligned with the whole." In flow, decisions arise effortlessly. You do not debate endlessly. You simply know. The knowing does not come from analysis, but from quiet attunement. In Buddhist meditation, this intuitive attunement is cultivated through silence. When the mind becomes quiet, you start hearing the subtle guidance that was always there. Life communicates through intuition, synchronicity, and feeling. Control, being noisy, drowns out these whispers. Flow, being still, hears them clearly. Many people call this guidance divine, but in Buddhism it is simply awareness responding to itself. There is no separation between you and life. You are the wave through which the ocean expresses its rhythm. As you continue to live in flow, you notice that resistance still arises occasionally. The mind tries to reclaim control, especially in moments of fear. Instead of fighting this, you meet it with compassion. You smile inwardly and say, "Ah, the old habit is visiting again." You breathe, you relax, and the grip loosens. Slowly, the trust deepens. Each time you let go and life carries you safely through, confidence grows. This confidence is not arrogance, it is faith born from experience. It says, "I have seen the river's wisdom, I can surrender again." Flow brings simplicity. You begin to prefer stillness over drama, presence over productivity, truth over appearance. You no longer need to prove yourself because you understand that existence itself validates you. Your worth is not measured by control, but by awareness. The frantic busyness that once filled your days loses appeal. You move slower, but everything you do becomes meaningful. The quality of your actions improves because they arise from clarity, not compulsion. When control dissolves, you rediscover wonder. You see beauty in ordinary things, the play of light on a wall, the sound of rain, the rhythm of footsteps. These moments are not interruptions of life, they are life. Control overlooks them in its chase for results. Flow celebrates them as the very essence of being. Gratitude becomes your natural state because you see how much you have been missing while rushing to control what never needed control. Letting go of control also transforms your spiritual practice. Meditation ceases to be a technique you try to master and becomes an expression of surrender. You no longer strive for enlightenment as a goal. You relax into the awareness that enlightenment is already here, obscured only by striving. You sit, breathe, and rest in the simple beingness that has always been present. You realize that awakening is not an achievement, but a recognition of what was never lost. In flow, the duality between sacred and ordinary dissolves. Washing dishes becomes as holy as chanting. Walking becomes as profound as prayer. The division between spiritual and worldly life fades because every moment becomes an opportunity to express awareness. This is why the Buddha taught mindfulness in daily activities, not just in meditation halls. The true measure of awakening is not how long you can sit still, but how gracefully you move through change. Gradually, control turns into cooperation. You begin to see yourself as a co-creator with life rather than its commander. You set intentions, you act from love, and you trust the outcome. You collaborate with the unfolding rather than dictate it. This is harmony, the state in which inner will and universal will align. You no longer ask, "How can I make this happen?" But, "What is life asking of me now?" And this question opens doors that control could never find. To live in flow requires courage because it means embracing uncertainty. The mind seeks guarantees, but trust offers only presence. Yet within that presence lies a security deeper than any plan could provide, the security of being aligned with reality. You discover that you are never truly lost. Even detours are part of the path. The river never stops flowing, it simply changes direction. When you trust this, fear becomes awe. Sometimes flow will carry you into solitude, into stillness, into seasons of waiting. The ego, impatient, will protest, but those pauses are not emptiness, they are incubation. Life is preparing you for the next movement. A flower does not bloom by constant effort. It rests in the soil until the moment is right. When you stop forcing, you begin to bloom naturally, at your own divine rhythm. There will be times when you slip back into control, and that too is part of the flow. The very act of noticing control without judgment is another form of surrender. Every moment becomes self-correcting when met with awareness. You cannot fall out of the flow. You can only forget you are in it. Life will remind you gently, sometimes through joy, sometimes through pain, until you remember again. As control dissolves, love deepens. You start trusting people more because you are no longer projecting your fears onto them. You allow connections to grow organically. You stop demanding permanence and start celebrating presence. Love becomes not a contract of control, but a dance of freedom. You see that true intimacy is impossible without trust, and trust is impossible without letting go. Even death, the final frontier of control, begins to lose its terror. You understand that what you call death is simply another form of transformation, another movement of the same eternal flow. Birth and death are like inhalation and exhalation, different expressions of the same breath. When you live in trust, you stop clinging to either. You live fully, die willingly, and rest in the awareness that neither life nor death can touch what you truly are. To live without control is not to drift aimlessly, but to move with grace. Grace is the spontaneous alignment of your being with the rhythm of existence. You feel guided, supported, and at peace. Obstacles still appear, but you face them with equanimity because you know that each one is part of the dance. The question is no longer, how can I avoid this? But what is this teaching me about trust? Every challenge becomes a reminder to relax deeper. In the end, control turning into flow is the flowering of faith, not blind faith, but faith born of direct experience. You have seen that life's intelligence surpasses your plans. You have witnessed how things fall apart only to fall into place. You have felt the relief that comes from no longer needing to force outcomes. And in that relief, you have discovered joy, the quiet joy of being carried by something vast and benevolent. There is a moment when you realize you are not living life. Life is living you. This realization is the ultimate surrender. You become transparent, like a clear stream through which light passes. The need to prove, to grasp, to control dissolves completely. What remains is presence, pure, luminous, and free. This is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. To let go of control is to awaken to your true nature, which has never been separate from the flow of all things. And so you walk gently through the world, acting without anxiety, loving without possession, speaking without force, resting without guilt. The flow carries you where you need to be, when you need to be there. Life becomes effortless, not because it is easy, but because resistance is gone. The river flows, and you flow with it. If this message spoke to your heart and helped you understand the beauty of letting go, remember to subscribe to the channel. Continue your journey of awareness with us, and let every lesson carry you deeper into peace, trust, and the flow of life itself. Gratitude opens the path to abundance. When the heart begins to trust life and the illusion of control dissolves, another miracle quietly unfolds. Gratitude. Gratitude is not something you practice occasionally, it becomes the atmosphere in which you live. It arises naturally when you see the perfection hidden beneath the apparent chaos of existence. Gratitude is the song of the awakened heart, the spontaneous response of awareness to the realization that everything, absolutely everything, has been guiding you toward growth. It is not a polite gesture, it is a sacred recognition. The Buddha often spoke of the rare jewel of a grateful mind, for it reflects understanding. To be grateful is to acknowledge that life owes you nothing and yet gives you everything. In the ordinary consciousness, gratitude appears only when things go well, when desires are fulfilled, when health is strong, when love returns our affection. Then the mind says, I am grateful. But this is conditional gratitude, and it vanishes as soon as conditions change. True gratitude, the kind that arises from deep trust, is unconditional. It does not depend on outcomes. It springs from perception. It is the ability to look at every moment, even the difficult ones, and whisper, thank you for this too. Such gratitude is revolutionary because it transforms the entire landscape of experience. It dissolves complaint, comparison, and self-pity. It turns ordinary existence into a continuous blessing. When you begin to see through the lens of gratitude, suffering itself changes its nature. You no longer ask, why is this happening to me? Instead, you ask, what is this trying to teach me? Gratitude reveals meaning in pain. It shows that every challenge has been a teacher, every loss a purification, every failure a doorway to humility. What once appeared as punishment now appears as preparation. Gratitude converts adversity into wisdom. This is why the masters say that gratitude and awakening are inseparable, because to be truly grateful is to have seen through the illusion that anything in the universe is random or meaningless. In Buddhism, this understanding is rooted in the law of dependent origination. Everything arises due to causes and conditions. When you understand this deeply, blame and resentment fade. How can you resent life when you see that each moment is the perfect consequence of countless interactions stretching across time? Gratitude blooms from this vision of interdependence. You realize that your life is supported by innumerable beings and forces: the sun that gives warmth, the rain that nourishes crops, the hands that prepared your food, the breath that enters unasked. The web of life is vast, and you are both recipient and contributor. When awareness of this web awakens, gratitude becomes as natural as breathing. You begin to thank life not only in words, but in presence. Gratitude becomes a way of seeing. When you open your eyes in the morning, you recognize that awakening itself is a gift. You may not have everything you desire, but you have this breath, this consciousness, this opportunity to experience and learn. You start noticing small miracles: the taste of water, the sound of birds, the warmth of sunlight on your skin. These moments are no longer dismissed as ordinary. They become gateways to wonder. Gratitude reveals the abundance that was always there, but hidden beneath the noise of wanting more. The practice of gratitude dismantles the poverty of comparison. The mind addicted to comparison lives in scarcity. It always measures, always concludes that something is missing. But gratitude ends this war because it does not compare. It appreciates. It says, "This moment is enough." In that recognition you feel complete. The Buddha's teaching on contentment, Santuti, expresses the same truth. Contentment is the greatest wealth. When you are content, you are rich regardless of possessions. When you are discontent, even kingdoms cannot satisfy you. Gratitude turns your attention from what is absent to what is present, and suddenly the world overflows with gifts. Yet gratitude is not blind to suffering. It does not deny pain or pretend that everything is pleasant. It simply holds pain within a wider understanding. You can be grateful for the lesson even while you cry. You can be grateful for the opportunity to grow even as you mourn. This dual awareness, the ability to feel pain and gratitude simultaneously, is maturity. It is what transforms wounds into wisdom. When you look back on your life through grateful eyes, you realize that the most painful chapters were the ones that shaped your strength, your empathy, and your clarity. Without them, you would not be who you are now. Gratitude, therefore, reconciles you with your past. It heals memory. Instead of carrying regret, you carry reverence. In the modern world, abundance is often measured by accumulation, by how much one can control or possess. But in the Buddhist view, true abundance is measured by the depth of appreciation. You may have little and yet feel infinitely rich because your heart is open. When you eat a simple meal with awareness, tasting each bite fully, it becomes a feast. When you walk under the open sky and breathe consciously, you feel wealth beyond measure. Gratitude transforms quantity into quality. It turns each moment into fulfillment. To cultivate gratitude is to train the mind to focus on what nourishes rather than what lacks. The mind is like soil. Whatever seeds you plant will grow. If you constantly water the seeds of complaint, dissatisfaction blossoms. If you water the seeds of gratitude, joy blooms naturally. The Buddha taught that the mind follows the direction of attention. Gratitude is therefore an intentional practice, a reorientation from lack to presence. You begin by acknowledging small blessings, and soon you realize there are no small blessings. Everything, even the breath, becomes extraordinary when seen through the eyes of gratitude. Trusting life deepens gratitude because it removes the sense of entitlement. You no longer believe that life owes you ease or comfort. You understand that everything you experience, every joy, every sorrow, is a gift for awakening. This humility dissolves bitterness. How could you resent what was given for your growth? Gratitude becomes reverence. You bow inwardly to existence itself. Each moment becomes sacred because it carries the whisper of wisdom. In this way, gratitude is the prayer of the awakened, silent, continuous, and unconditional. One of the greatest paradoxes revealed by gratitude is that it opens the path to abundance, not by demanding more, but by releasing the need for more. When you appreciate what is, life responds by expanding your capacity to receive. This is not a magical transaction, but a psychological truth. The grateful mind is open, relaxed, receptive. The ungrateful mind is closed, tense, defensive. Life flows easily into openness. When you are grateful, opportunities, relationships, and insights begin to appear naturally because your perception has shifted from scarcity to wholeness. Gratitude changes not only what you see, but how you see. It refines your vibration, aligns you with the flow of giving and receiving that underlies the universe. In Buddhist symbolism, the open hand represents both generosity and gratitude. The two cannot be separated. When you are grateful, generosity arises effortlessly because you see yourself as part of the cycle of giving. You realize that what you receive is not meant to be hoarded, but shared. The Buddha said, "If you knew what I know about the power of giving, you would not let a single meal pass without sharing it." Gratitude dissolves selfishness because it recognizes that abundance is not personal, it is universal. By giving, you participate in the endless circulation of energy. By receiving gratefully, you allow others to give. In this way, gratitude sustains harmony. Gratitude also changes your relationship with time. Control and fear live in the future. Regret and resentment live in the past. Gratitude lives only in the present. You cannot truly feel grateful while lost in memory or imagination. Gratitude anchors you in the now, the only moment where life actually exists. When you are grateful, even for one breath, you are present. Presence is the essence of enlightenment. So gratitude is not merely a moral quality, it is a gateway to awakening. It teaches the same lesson as mindfulness, that fulfillment is not somewhere else, it is here, waiting to be noticed. Sometimes, gratitude appears as a quiet acceptance of what cannot be changed. You may not understand why something happened, but you trust that it carries meaning beyond your current view. This is faith born from wisdom, not from hope. Hope depends on a desired future. Faith rests in the perfection of the present. Gratitude expresses this faith through appreciation. It says, "I do not need to know why, I only need to know that life is intelligent." When you live this way, even uncertainty becomes a source of wonder. You begin to thank the unknown because it keeps you humble and alive. A life of gratitude radiates peace. People feel it in your presence because gratitude softens your energy. You become less reactive, more patient, more generous. You listen with your whole being because you value every interaction. Gratitude dissolves arrogance and entitlement, making space for genuine connection. The more grateful you are, the more love flows through you. Gratitude is love in recognition, love that has become aware of its own blessings. At a deeper level, gratitude reveals the illusion of separateness. When you feel grateful, who is grateful and to whom? The boundary between giver and receiver dissolves. You realize that gratitude is life thanking itself. The breath thanks the air. The flower thanks the sun. The heart thanks existence for beating. In that recognition, you experience unity. Gratitude becomes not a relationship between two, but the song of the one. It is the universe celebrating its own beauty through your awareness. The Buddha once said that a grateful person is rare and therefore precious. Why rare? Because gratitude requires the death of the complaining mind. The ego thrives on dissatisfaction. It defines itself by what it lacks. When gratitude arises, the ego loses ground. It no longer has a story to tell about injustice, about what it deserves, about how life has been unfair. Gratitude silences that narrative. What remains is silence, and in that silence you discover peace. This is why gratitude and ego cannot coexist. To be truly grateful is to be egoless, even for a moment. It is to stand naked before life saying, I have enough, I am enough. As gratitude deepens, even the concept of enough dissolves because you see that life itself is overflowing. You stop measuring abundance in material terms and begin measuring it in awareness. The fact that you can perceive, love, learn and awaken becomes the ultimate treasure. You realize that every breath is a miracle happening millions of times a day without your command. Gratitude reveals the hidden opulence of existence, an opulence that cannot be bought or owned. It can only be seen. There is a profound peace that comes from saying thank you to everything. Thank you to the light and to the darkness. Thank you to the beginnings and the endings. Thank you to the joy and to the sorrow. This gratitude is not sentimental. It is liberation. It acknowledges the totality of life without division. You are no longer fighting reality. You are bowing to it. And in that bow, you are free. When gratitude becomes your natural state, life begins to mirror it. You attract experiences that reflect your inner abundance because your perception no longer filters them through lack. You meet people who resonate with your openness. You notice synchronicities, doors opening, ideas flowing, solutions appearing at the right moment. These are not coincidences, but reflections of harmony. Gratitude aligns you with the rhythm of the universe, and the universe responds in kind. This does not mean life will always be easy. The Buddha never promised a life without challenges, but when gratitude is present, challenges no longer feel like curses, they feel like invitations. You face them with dignity and grace because you trust their purpose. You understand that abundance is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of meaning. Every moment becomes rich because it serves your awakening. This is true abundance, a richness of being, not of having. As your gratitude expands, you begin to notice that giving thanks is not separate from giving love. Every act of kindness becomes a way of saying thank you to existence. You find yourself smiling more often, helping spontaneously, forgiving easily. Gratitude softens the armor around your heart. Where once there was suspicion, there is openness. Where once there was demand, there is generosity. Gratitude does not ask, "What will I gain?" It asks, "How can I honor what I have received?" In that question, humility and joy meet. The more you live in gratitude, the more you realize that abundance is already your nature. You are made of the same infinite energy that creates galaxies. You are sustained by forces beyond comprehension. Gratitude is simply the recognition of this truth. It awakens awe, a wordless reverence for existence. You begin to walk through life as if through a temple, touching each moment with care. Every encounter becomes sacred because you see the divine shimmering in all forms. Even in solitude, gratitude keeps you company. You sit in silence and feel full. You no longer need external stimulation to feel alive. The mind that once searched for excitement now finds wonder in stillness. This is the peace of one who trusts the flow completely. Gratitude becomes your prayer, your meditation, your way of breathing. You give thanks for no reason, and that reasonlessness is the purest expression of freedom. In the deepest sense, gratitude is the recognition that you and life are not two. When you thank life, you are thanking yourself, for you are an expression of that same consciousness. The wave thanks the ocean not because it is separate, but because it recognizes the source of its being. Gratitude is self-realization disguised as appreciation. It is enlightenment translated into emotion. Over time, gratitude becomes effortless. It no longer requires thought. It becomes reflexive, like the heartbeat. You wake up and thank existence for awakening. You eat and thank the food. You face difficulty and thank the lesson. Gratitude becomes your constant companion, whispering in every breath, and with it comes an unshakable peace, the peace of knowing that nothing is missing, that everything belongs. To trust life is to live in gratitude. To live in gratitude is to dwell in abundance. This abundance cannot be taken away because it is not dependent on circumstance. It is the abundance of being alive, of being conscious, of being part of the infinite dance of creation. Once you see this, you stop chasing more. You simply open your arms to what is already here. Gratitude transforms perception into prayer and prayer into presence. It is both the path and the destination. Every spiritual tradition points to it, but in Buddhist wisdom, gratitude is inseparable from enlightenment because it reflects the direct understanding of interconnection. The enlightened mind sees no separation, and therefore every experience becomes worthy of thanks. Gratitude is the fragrance of awakening. In this state, life feels generous. You no longer live as a beggar asking for blessings. You live as a witness recognizing them everywhere. You realize that abundance was never about accumulation, but about awareness. The richest person is the one who sees the most beauty, feels the most gratitude, and needs the least. Gratitude is wealth that multiplies the more it is shared. And when you live this way, others feel it. Your gratitude becomes contagious. It awakens appreciation in those around you. In this way, gratitude not only transforms your life, but also becomes an offering to the world. When you reach this depth of gratitude, you finally understand that trust, acceptance, flow, and gratitude are not separate steps, but facets of the same awakening. Trust opens the heart. Acceptance softens resistance, flow aligns you with the universe, and gratitude reveals abundance. Together they form the rhythm of an awakened life, a life lived not in fear, but in reverence. If these reflections on gratitude resonated with you and reminded you of the beauty already present in your life, remember to subscribe to the channel. Continue walking this path of awareness with us, where each lesson deepens your peace, and each moment becomes a blessing waiting to be seen. Freedom through surrender. When you begin to live with deep trust, acceptance, flow, and gratitude, there comes a moment of ultimate transformation, the realization that true freedom lies in surrender. For most of your life, the word surrender may have sounded like defeat, like giving up, like loss. But from the perspective of awakening, surrender is not the end of power. It is the discovery of a greater power than personal will. It is the recognition that life itself is the true doer, the silent force that breathes you, moves you, sustains you. To surrender is to return to that truth, to stop claiming ownership of what never belonged to you in the first place. It is the most intimate act of trust, the final letting go of resistance, the moment you stop rowing and allow the river to carry you where it already intended to go. This surrender is not passive resignation. It is active cooperation with reality. It is not saying, "I give up," but rather, "I give in" to the deeper wisdom that knows better than my limited mind. In surrender, you no longer fight the current of life. You become one with it. The Buddha described liberation not as conquest, but as release, the extinguishing of grasping, the end of clinging to self, to desire, to opinion, to control. When grasping ceases, freedom dawns. That freedom is surrender. At first, surrender feels terrifying to the ego because the ego's entire existence depends on resistance. The ego is the sum of every identification, every belief, every I that claims ownership of thought, emotion, and action. It survives by separating itself from the flow of life, by insisting, "I am this, this is mine, this must go my way." But as awareness deepens, you begin to see that these claims are illusions. You do not choose your thoughts. They arise on their own. You do not control your emotions. They appear and vanish like clouds. Even your body acts according to biological and cosmic laws far beyond comprehension. Surrender begins when you stop pretending to be the controller and start witnessing the miracle of existence unfolding through you. Surrender is the moment of truth. It is the point where you no longer demand that life fit your image of perfection. You stop asking why and start saying yes. This yes is sacred. It does not mean approving of suffering or injustice, but acknowledging what is. It means seeing that reality, even when painful, is part of an infinite intelligence beyond human judgment. When you say this inner yes, a door opens. Peace floods in where conflict used to be. You feel the same stillness the Buddha felt under the Bodhi tree, a silence so vast it can contain everything without being disturbed by anything. Many fear that surrender will make them weak or passive, but in truth, it brings the greatest strength. The surrendered person is unshakable because they no longer depend on circumstances for peace. Their joy is not fragile. It does not come from winning or losing, from gaining or keeping. It comes from being aligned with what is. When you surrender, you cannot be disappointed because you no longer insist that life meet your expectations. You move through the world with quiet power, the power of one who is free from the inner war between what is and what should be. This inner war consumes much of human energy, the constant argument with reality, the endless mental noise of "this should not have happened," "it's unfair," "I can't accept this," drains vitality. When surrender replaces resistance, that energy is liberated. Suddenly you have space for creativity, compassion, presence. You realize how much of your suffering was self-created, born from refusal. The pain of life is inevitable. The suffering of resistance is optional. Surrender dissolves the second arrow. Surrender also transforms the way you see your past. You stop seeing mistakes as failures and start seeing them as teachers. You realize that every wrong turn brought you to this moment of understanding. Even regret softens, because you understand that the person you were could not have acted differently given their level of awareness at that time. Surrender brings forgiveness, not as moral superiority, but as comprehension. You forgive others too, because you see that everyone is acting from their conditioning, trying to find peace in the only way they know. When you surrender the need to judge, compassion becomes effortless. In Buddhism, surrender is inseparable from the insight of no self, anatta. To surrender means to stop identifying with the separate I who thinks it must control, defend, and achieve. You see that the I is a bundle of memories, habits, and desires, not an independent entity. When the illusion of this I drops away, what remains is spacious awareness, silent and free. Actions still happen, but they are no longer claimed. Thoughts still arise, but they are no longer believed. Emotions still flow, but they no longer define. This is surrender, not an act, but a recognition. Life lives itself, and you rest as the witness of its unfolding. Surrender is not achieved through force, it happens through exhaustion. After countless attempts to fix, control, and understand, the mind grows weary. It realizes the futility of fighting the infinite. This is the moment of grace, when you finally exhale and say, "Enough, I will stop struggling." That single breath can change everything. It is as if you've been clenching your fists your whole life and suddenly open your hands. What was heavy becomes light. What was complicated becomes simple. The stillness you were seeking outside has been here all along, waiting behind your resistance. To surrender does not mean you stop acting or caring. It means your actions arise from clarity rather than compulsion. You still participate in life, but now with ease. You speak when words are needed, remain silent when silence serves better. You help others not because you must, but because love naturally moves through you. There is no ego claiming credit. There is only the joy of alignment. The Buddha called this right action, conduct arising from wisdom, not desire. Such action is effortless because it flows from truth rather than from fear. The greatest paradox of surrender is that by relinquishing control, you discover mastery. Not mastery over the world, but mastery over the mind. The mind that no longer demands becomes serene. It stops swinging between hope and despair. You become steady, like a mountain surrounded by changing weather. Pleasure comes and goes, pain comes and goes, praise and blame rise and fall, but the mountain remains. Surrender anchors you in that stillness. You are no longer thrown about by circumstance because you have found the groundless ground of being. In this state, even death loses its sting. The fear of death arises from attachment to form, to identity. But when you surrender to the flow of impermanence, you understand that life and death are two sides of the same coin. You were never separate from the cycle. You were always the process itself. The wave does not fear returning to the ocean, for it was never apart. Surrender is that return, the homecoming to the boundless ocean of being. When you live surrendered, you die every moment. You die to the past, to the illusion of control, to the false self. And in doing so, you are reborn endlessly into freedom. This surrender brings deep humility. You stop claiming authorship of success and ownership of wisdom. You see that everything, every insight, every act of kindness, every breath is a gift. Humility does not mean thinking less of yourself. It means seeing yourself clearly, as part of the whole. The sun shines, the rain falls, the seed grows, and so do you, not because of will, but because of life moving through you. Gratitude arises spontaneously in this realization. You bow inwardly to the mystery that animates all things, and that bow is both surrender and freedom. When surrender deepens, life becomes astonishingly simple. You no longer divide experience into sacred and ordinary, success and failure, progress and setback. Everything becomes one movement of being. You stop striving to be spiritual and simply live awake. Even meditation changes. It is no longer a technique, but a state of rest in what already is. You sit not to reach enlightenment, but to celebrate it. The effort to become drops away because you see that there is nothing to become. You were never apart from truth, only the mind imagined distance. Freedom through surrender is not a distant ideal. It is available in every moment you stop fighting. Each time you feel tension, anxiety, or impatience, you can ask yourself, what am I resisting? The question itself brings awareness. When you find the resistance, perhaps it is to an emotion, a situation, or a person, breathe and soften around it. Let it be. You do not have to fix it. You only have to stop tightening against it. The moment you stop opposing, you surrender. And in that surrender, peace enters. This is liberation in daily life, not dramatic, not mystical, but profoundly real. Surrender also means trusting the unfolding of your path. Many people live in fear of making the wrong choice, of missing their destiny. But from the perspective of surrender, every choice you make is the right one, because it becomes the next step in your awakening. Even detours are part of the road. The Buddha's path is not linear. It spirals through understanding, forgetting, and remembering. When you trust that everything serves your evolution, you stop worrying about direction. You walk with faith, guided not by maps, but by awareness itself. There will be times when surrender is tested, moments when loss feels unbearable, when the unknown seems too vast. The mind will want to reclaim control, to protect itself with plans and certainty. But the very act of noticing this impulse is part of surrender. You do not need to fight resistance, you simply watch it. Awareness itself is surrender, because awareness does not resist. It allows everything to arise and pass without preference. So even when you cannot surrender consciously, life is still surrendering you. Even your resistance is part of the flow. When surrender becomes total, you discover that you never surrendered to something outside yourself. You surrendered to your own deeper nature, the timeless awareness that has always been here, watching, waiting, patient. This awareness is freedom. It was never bound by circumstance, never born, never dying. It is the witness of all change, the silence beneath all sound. To live in surrender is to live as that awareness, allowing form to come and go without losing yourself in it. This is what the Buddha meant by nirvana, the extinguishing of illusion, the peace beyond conditions. In this freedom, love blooms naturally. Love is the fragrance of surrender. When the ego dissolves, love flows unobstructed because there is no me and you, only one life expressing itself in infinite forms. You love not because someone deserves it, but because love is your nature. Even those who hurt you are seen as part of the same totality. Compassion becomes effortless, forgiveness instantaneous. You cannot hate when you know that the other is not separate. Surrender, therefore, fulfills the greatest commandment of all wisdom traditions, to love all beings as yourself, because they are yourself. Surrender also brings courage. You no longer live in fear of loss because you have nothing to lose. You have already let go. You no longer seek validation because your worth is inherent. You no longer chase security because you have found it in the changeless awareness behind all change. This is true fearlessness, not recklessness, but serenity. The warrior of surrender does not fight battles. They dissolve them by refusing to resist. Their power is quiet, yet immeasurable. When you live surrendered, even the ordinary becomes sacred. Washing dishes, walking through rain, hearing laughter, all shine with clarity. You are no longer trying to get somewhere. You are here. The present moment, once taken for granted, becomes infinite. This is freedom, not the ability to do whatever you want, but the ability to be fully present with whatever is. The chains that bound you were never external. They were expectations. When expectations dissolve, every situation is freedom. The prison door was open all along. Surrender is the act of walking through it. The journey toward surrender is paradoxical. You cannot force it, yet you can prepare for it by loosening resistance wherever you find it. You can practice trust in small ways, by letting someone else lead, by accepting uncertainty, by allowing silence. Each small act of letting go builds the muscle of surrender. Eventually, the mind learns that it is safe to release. Then one day, perhaps in a moment of stillness, perhaps in exhaustion, the surrender happens fully. It feels like dying and being born at once, dying to illusion, born to truth. You realize that the freedom you sought was never in control but in release. After surrender, life continues, but everything feels lighter. You laugh more easily. You forgive quickly. You no longer analyze endlessly because you no longer believe that understanding gives control. You see that understanding itself is part of the flow, appearing when needed, dissolving when not. You rest in the mystery without demanding to solve it. The need to define yourself fades. You are content to be a verb rather than a noun, a process rather than a thing. You are life happening, not a person living life. That is the freedom of surrender. The masters describe this state as effortless living. The Taoists call it Wu Wei, action without effort. The Buddha called it right mindfulness. Christians call it living in grace. All point to the same truth. When you stop trying to control existence, existence begins to express itself through you with elegance. You become like a flute through which divine breath moves, producing music, not of your making, yet perfectly your own. Every word, every movement, every breath becomes part of that symphony. At this point, you understand that surrender was never something you did. It was the recognition of what always was. Life was always flowing, awareness was always present, freedom was always here. The only illusion was the belief that you were separate. When that belief dissolves, there is nothing left to surrender and no one left to surrender. Only life remains, vast, radiant, and free. The Buddha's final words were, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive diligently." Many interpret strive as effort, but in the light of surrender, it means awareness, the diligent presence that watches everything arise and pass without clinging. To live this way is to live liberated, even amidst impermanence. Surrender does not remove change. It removes the fear of change. It lets life dance through you while you rest as the still center. So freedom through surrender is not found at the end of the path. It is the path itself. Every time you release control, you taste it. Every time you accept the moment fully, you embody it. Every time you say yes to what is, you live it. Slowly, the taste becomes permanent. The river no longer frightens you. You are the river. You do not need to swim. You flow. This freedom cannot be described, only lived. It is the quiet joy of being nobody, the serenity of having no argument with life, the bliss of knowing that nothing is missing. It is beyond excitement, beyond boredom, beyond striving. A peace so simple that the mind overlooks it until the very end. But once seen, it can never be unseen. You have returned home to the groundless truth. Life is not happening to you. Life is happening as you. And in that realization, all effort ceases. You rest, open, vast, alive. This is the final gift of trust, the flowering of surrender into freedom. If this reflection on surrender and freedom has touched something within you, remember to subscribe to the channel and continue this journey of awareness. Each video, each teaching is another step into peace, simplicity, and the radiant freedom that comes from trusting life completely.